So, welcome back to the second of our panels tonight, which is about artist management, and I'm hoping we'll cover a bit of artist development as well. But we will be predominantly talking about artist managers, Mr. and Mrs. 20%. Okay, joining me this evening is Scott Lewis from Clue Records and Come Play With Me, all the way over from Leeds, West Yorkshire Massives. And then Megan Burns, who's kindly come all the way from, is it Liverpool tonight? Yeah, she's come over from Liverpool. She's a freelance artist manager, working as Tone Artist Services. And then, last but not least, we've got Cy Ricks from Holy Moly Management and Kaiser Chiefs.
That's more like it,
Come
yeah.
on,
Come
let's
on.
have a bit of let's be impressed, people.
Well, do you want to sing alongside? Do you want to get a chorus of Ruby going?
He's taking a night off from doing the Yorkshire Tea ad. Were you part of that ad?
Yeah, I'm on that, yeah.
Yeah, you're
I had
on
more
that.
hair, though, at that stage.
Yeah. All right. Okay, we'll kick off. Megan, are we all right to start with you? Give us a bit of insight on how and why you became an artist manager, and then we'll move over to Cy, and then we'll come to you, Scott.
That's good.
Okay.
Okay, so my name's Megan. I've worked in the entertainment industry since I was 13. I've been an actress, I've been in a band, I've worked in cosmetic surgery, and then once I got bored of cosmetic surgery, I decided that I actually wanted to work in music again. And I'd always had a passion from the age of about 15, I think. I'd street teamed for a lot of bands, and I'd unofficially always helped local musicians, bands that had come into town. I spoke to a lot of record labels, and I just found myself getting more and more involved behind the scenes. And so when I relocated from London to Liverpool, I spoke to a few of my friends within that music scene, and they talked about setting up a music management company, and they invited me to join them. And so I did, and I've been doing this now for about 5 years, 6 years. So yeah.
Okay.
Just talk about myself.
Yeah.
Talk
Why
about
you
me.
changed from just being in a band to being an artist manager?
Okay, so I've been obviously been in Kaisers for a long time. Since 2003 we formed. Before that I was in bands at school, always just been involved in music. And then as Kaiser's career sort of got further in, and we do a little bit it's a little bit less crazy. Like there was a really, really crazy time early on when we were just on tour, like 10 months of the year and stuff, and there wasn't any time for doing anything else. And just before COVID actually, but then obviously COVID was a really massive amount of break of like having loads of time. I started just mentoring some people with a organisation called Launchpad, which is Yorkshire-wide, which is really good. You should look it up. And that gave me a bit of confidence that I'd learnt a few things over the time being in the band, surprisingly. And so I started managing a couple of people, and so I just managed 3 artists now. And yeah, that's it really. I just sort of just gradually got into it, because I think I don't want to get giving something back is not exactly right. It's like I just think over time I think you just gain experience that's good to give artists, and I think I've got quite a good managerial sort of angle. In Kaisers I've always been sort of the one that's quite organised and doing quite a lot of that stuff.
Right.
But I understand what it's like being in a band and being on the creative side, as well as some of the sort of more boring admin-y stuff. So I think it gives me, I always like to work with someone else, but it gives me a nice sort of position when I'm talking to artists, basically.
Nice one. Okay, Scott, because you were in management, but you've had to step back from that a bit now, haven't you?
Yeah, I made a choice. So I think management naturally comes into part of what I do in other areas. So what I'm doing at the moment, I run a record label called KYOM23 Records. So we just turned 10 last year, so we're an independent DIY label based in Leeds, working with indie alternative artists. I work for an organisation called Come Play With Me, artist development, focusing on marginalised groups and trying to platform people that don't normally get those opportunities. Lecture at a university in Leeds, support with Launchpad as well, do some mentoring there, so I know aside from that. And I was managing artists on the side of that as well, but it is a lot. It's like, so that, and it wasn't right. The artists weren't quite getting the time that they should have been getting. Maybe was it with something I was maybe conscious of. So and they sort of split up post COVID. So that was when I stopped being an artist manager. But yeah, a big part of the label is sort of soft management if there's not a manager in place. So I've got experience, and yeah, it comes from being an artist, being in bands, doing that, not wanting to be on that side of it anymore, and sort of using the experiences and trying to further other people's careers and give them the support that I felt that they needed and was missing from what they were doing.
Okay. Should we just also talk about the EMI Leeds, and let's get that in there.
We should do, yeah. So I don't know if anybody's aware, but EMI, I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with, like huge major label. They earlier this year opened up EMI North. So that's the first time a major record label has moved and had an office space outside of the capital, outside of London. So they're based in Leeds, and both KYOM and Come Play With Me have partnered with them. So we're not owned by them, we're not in their debt or anything like that. Like, we are still our own, we make our own decisions and have our own autonomy, but we get to work in their sort of support network, their framework, their infrastructure and things like that, and get a lot of their great experience and things like that. So yeah, EMI North is there. It's not quite fully fledged. I think it will be a label at some point in time, but it's been a really interesting point being sort of in the announcements and the whirlwind of all that coming out, because it's such a huge industry-wide piece of news.
Yeah.
And the reaction's been really positive and great so far. So it's just wondering what that will look like going forward. But hopefully it'll bring a lot of opportunity and jobs to not just to Leeds, to Yorkshire and to the region and further north from there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, is this going to be quite, is it going to be useful for us up here in the north? Taking into consideration, I'd worked in the industry for over 36 years, and they've always been in London. It's always been London, isn't it? So you'd always have to schlep down to London to meet up with A&R people. So do you think it's going to improve the profile overall, or?
Excuse me. Well, I think it can't hurt to have more people, with expertise and stuff in the north. I think it remains to be seen slightly exactly what they do. Like, it needs to be like a real solid commitment to just support artists in the north, and not just be like an outpost where ultimately people end up having to go to London anyway. So it has to be like but we will see, and I just think it's a positive step. I think some other company might be doing something in Newcastle as well. So maybe it's like a new model for like having a bit more, what's it called, levelling up. Maybe, actually record industry, music industry could show the government what levelling up's meant to look like. Maybe. But we'll see.
Yeah, that'll be fun. All right, should we get on to your roles? Day to day, Megan, what's a day in the life of an artist manager for you?
I guess it's kind of a bespoke thing. It's not the same for every single artist. I meet some artists and they're very much at the developmental stage, so my job could even incorporate the role of an A&R, because I then have to sort out their initial releases. For an artist who already has a record label in place, then I always say that I just have to do all the bad cop boring stuff. So I have to deal with the admin, I have to deal with the accounting, I have to work with putting tours together. Sometimes I have to work as a tour manager remotely, which, thanks to technology, it's a lot easier now. But at the moment, I've got a band tour in America and I'm working across 2 time zones. because, yeah, even though they've got a driver, it's like any little thing that goes wrong, it's like my children. I have to fix it, you know? So I think it's business, strategy, and creative guidance, to just put in simple terms, but everything else I'm doing.
Okay. Right. And what about you, Si? What's day in the life in Holy Moly?
Oh, it's the same, really. I think it's just dependent on the artist. So some artists, I think, are fairly self-sufficient, and you're sort of just an overseer, really, and maybe you're planning strategy with like releases and stuff, but they look after themselves, like on tour or in general and stuff. And other artists, I guess, especially solo artists, who I feel are slightly sorry for. I think it's like a thing that a lot of people do now, but who haven't got someone to bounce off, particularly in a band situation. So then you would be like Megan was saying, like you'd maybe do A&R, like talking about their music. You'd be like helping with, I don't know, I mean, because of my contacts and stuff, like one of my guys, I'm like helping him, like lending him guitars and all sorts of little bits and pieces. So just try it like within reason, without sort of ruining your entire life, just trying to be the person at the end of the phone who can sort all the problems out. I think about, like I learned from our manager, I was always like, you know, what does a manager do? I sort of like was always sort of chipping away why you give 20% to them, you know, and they do lots and lots of things, but often that thing is just linking you with the person, or being the person that's the go-between between the record company and the band, so the band don't say something stupid to the record company or whatever. But I kind of worked out you're kind of a phone book, really. You're like you are your contacts and your ability to sort of solve problems.
Okay. And Scott, because I saw that you'd actually done tour management. Was that the physical tour management? Because you know that's a whole different ball game in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, that, and to varying levels of success. One like a tour across Europe, like doing. I think we did 13 different countries, or 9 different countries, 13 dates, and all went amazingly well. Had an amazing time. And then a UK tour, and both of these were supporting other artists. One where I reversed the van into a pole. It was not coming at me, it was static, I was going at it. So that caused a lot of stress and damage to the van, as well as stress and damage to the artist. Not damage, but like mental fractures, we'll call them. So yeah, I think a lot of that as well is also dealing with those sorts of things, dealing with whether you've coached them, as I did at that point, but it's trying to support artists through those difficult moments and getting through that. So I think tour management is, again, I think it's filling in the gaps of what needs to do, and on that it's having structure and allowing the artist, understanding the artist, having a good understanding of what the artist needs, how they work. And one of the tours, it was this one where I did reverse into a pole. One of the singer from the band was not going through a very good period of time, personally, mental health, and it was like we weren't really aware of it until we were in the van and it was happening around that, and then it's like, okay, and we really need to sort of work a way to do that. The band weren't communicating fantastically, so it's also a lot of using your skills and experience to see those things and identify them, and then not only be there and try to sort of help that person through what it is that they're going through at that moment, but also be able to communicate with the rest of the band and try to get them to understand, because they're like, well, why aren't they just having a great time? We're on tour, it's amazing. It's like people have got a lot of different expectations and things there. So, but yeah, it was a lot of a tour book, a plan, people understand what they're doing, go in stress-free shows, try to make them as easy and comfortable as possible. They can go on and perform, have a good night, but also get up in the morning and have that balance between the wildness and the fun, and this is a job and a role, and this is a part of your career longer term. It's not just on the now. Yeah,
because it's physically can be quite.
Yeah, well, on that time, I was still working a day job in an office for a bank at that time when I was on that the tour where how many times am I going to have to say I crashed a van into a pole? Like that, that was not what I came to talk about. But for that tour, we got to the place and I was awake for like 38 hours consecutive on that. But part of that was because I tried to go to sleep after crashing, and I was like, just crash the van, it's going to cost money. So that was part of that. But it's physically draining, demanding, but you've got to be the one who's composed and
holding it
that air of confidence and the air of like keeping it going, so then you exude that, and then hopefully other people soak that, and it all works out from there. I think if you can communicate that really well in verbally, but also just in just being composed, and yeah.
And you're doing it long distance.
Yeah, and it's an all-female band, and so that also has different concerns associated with it. They're supporting. So we're in a situation where they don't always have a dressing room because the headliner needs 2 offices for his production. Okay. So that means the girls are often, there's the curtain draped in a corner for them to get changed in, and they've got stage makeup and stuff, and it's like they've been on tour now for almost 10 weeks because they did Europe and the UK before this. And so, it's the well-being of the artist is also, it becomes a responsibility of the manager. And I mean, I think it's good because I think back in the days, especially when I was in a band myself, like, I don't think it's that nobody cared, but it just didn't seem like anyone's priority, because I'd be like a female on my own on a tour with like 30 guys. And it's like, I'd have to share dressing rooms with all of them. I wouldn't have my own. And it's, not everyone's respectful.
Yeah.
And I had a tour manager who wasn't as understanding of that. And then I eventually got a female tour manager. And that completely changed the game because she made sure I had my space. And so I think my approach to management is shaped very much by my experiences. So it's like the artist's well-being is always top priority. Because, you can always make money, but if you haven't got an artist to begin with, you're not going to...
Yeah. Si, how much is your management and mentoring and that based on your experience of being managed? If that's it.
Probably just better and worse. Like you learn what you like and don't like about your managers. I think it's to my mental health problem, but our manager is like amazing at responding to everything. So if I'll be in like America and he's in Japan and I send him an email and I know that it's 4 o'clock in the morning where he is, I think he's a robot, because he'll still reply. Like 10 minutes later he'll reply. I'm why are you not asleep?
Yeah.
So, but he's that rubbed off on me, like being efficient, being available for artists. Not all of I wouldn't say 24/7, but trying to make sure they know that you are listening to them, and you are on it. And if it's a problem, like a personal problem or a more industry problem, that they have faith that you're gonna deal with it. Yeah. That sort of thing. And what else have I learned from our managers? I think my thing with actually managing, I've only done it for 4 years maybe, is getting help. Is really getting help / working with people / as I said before, who you know and how they can help you solve the problem. So most of the people that I do, I either do it with someone else. So one artist that goes through Clue, so work with Scott, and Scott's great because Scott is good at managing bands as well.
Yeah.
Yes,
so any little bits of knowledge that I don't have, I know that Scott can pick it up and stuff like that. And another artist that I do with someone else, one of my other friends who I know, he's got he knows everything about digital marketing that I don't know. So that's great. So it means I don't have to learn any of that. I can concentrate on the sort of I think I'm really good at the personal stuff, like I said before, knowing what the band is and just trying to look after them.
Yeah.
And a bit like what Scott said, make sure if you've got an artist who's happy and they're being productive and everything, that's the most important thing, because without that, if you haven't got an artist or you haven't got any songs or whatever, then you haven't really got anything to do. So just being collaborative, I think, is another thing. It's really important. Yeah.
I mean, with your relationship with your bands, do you see yourself as a kind of another member type partner? Is it?
I think you've got to see yourself as the bass player, which is what I am. Because you're not that important.
Yeah.
But you are required for the show.
Right.
If you're not there, someone will be like, "Where is he?"
Yeah, that's a great analogy. So be like bass player.
All the best. All the best. All the producers and stuff are all bass players. Yeah, that's good.
But it is that relationship, that dynamic is really important because it all can get not personal so much, but you do have to have a good dynamic and a good relationship with your manager, don't you?
I mean, I think that the artist really has to trust the manager because, I mean, it is, at the end of the day, the manager's job to sort of make decisions in terms of deals or creative directions sometimes. Like, a lot of the artists will come with an idea and you have to make that idea happen. And so they have to trust you to let you put that creative strategy in place and say, well, maybe don't do this. Like, leave it until, like, maybe a couple of months, but do this first. And it's like, if they didn't trust you, they'd just be like, no, we're going to do this anyway, and then it might blow up, and then they'll find a way to kind of pin it on you anyway, because that's sort of also the manager's job, is to, like, take the fall. It's just like, oh, sorry, but yeah, I think they do have to kind of look at you as, like, the captain of the ship.
I would say, like, when we do things like this, I do things like this, and you get, if it's more of like a bandy one, people ask, like, about getting a manager or whatever, and I'm always like, it's the most important relationship. So, like, you can change record labels, or, like, I don't know, you probably won't know who your radio plugger is, maybe, or whatever. But the manager, you can change manager, but it's really hard, do you know what I mean? And, like, your manager should be someone that you totally trust, like you were saying, like, it's like, not a friendship, but, like, it's the most important one. Like, don't rush in to get a manager, because I think that's the worst possible thing you can do.
Because that was going to be one of the questions I was going to ask was, when's a good time for someone to start thinking about management? Which, you know.
Getting a manager, or
well, getting
being
a manager. Oh, yeah, well, being a manager. Yeah, we'll get to being a manager. Okay. But if a band or an artist, when do you think they should start thinking about getting management or looking for a manager?
I don't know the answer to that, because I don't know if there is one. I think it's about finding the person who is almost crazy enough to dedicate that amount of time to an artist, and you find that relationship with. I think every artist that I've worked with, I've just thought they've been incredible, and I've wanted to support them in some way. So hopefully, it depends on the level of the manager as well. I think it depends on what you're doing and what the level that manager's at, what they can bring to you. If they're just you're early as an artist in a band, and they're quite early in developing, that can be a really good thing, because then you grow together and you go through these experiences together, and you've got that allowance to, like, fail or mess up or do those things, and that is some of the most important things you'll ever do as a manager or artist. When you're moving on to, I know you're looking at, like, bigger deals, or you're looking at the more higher end maybe of the industry, it's somebody, again, you need to find that personal relationship. And I think, like, back to the last point, like, it almost felt parental to me in a way. Like, that's how I felt with the artists. Very, very close, but also that sort of, like, they'd trust you and they would sort of value your opinion. And I think what Megan was saying as well about the creative input, I don't think is, like, it's sort of an underrated element of a manager. I don't think some artists will see a manager as a functional things, like, you will get me this deal or you will do me that, but it's like they have really great, a good manager will have really great creative ideas, or bring those elements to it as well. So but in terms of getting one, I think quite a difficult part of the puzzle to get, I find. I think it's really hard to get a manager, because you've got to find somebody that's right for you, sort of devoted to you, and then can take you on to those next steps as well. So that's a bit of a non-answer, but take chances on people. I think it's about the relationship and understanding that people will grow. Everywhere's got to start at this point to get to that point, and so build a relationship first.
Maybe what I should have asked is, if a band gets approached by someone who says, "Oh, I'd like to manage you," what are the things they should look out for? Would that have been a better question, or are we at similar answers?
I mean, I think first and foremost, you have to want to be managed.
Yeah.
Because it's all right thinking, oh, I want a manager, it's going to open all of these doors, but if you have a manager, they're also going to be telling you to do things that you might not necessarily want to do. Like, I constantly have a battle with social media because a lot of my artists formed a band and didn't think that social media would be the thing that was getting them shows and selling them records. But unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, it works for some people, that is part of the industry now. That is part of being a band. Like, it is like, once you get a manager on board, it does become, I hate to say, but a bit more like a job, but it's not a job. But, you know, there are things that you have to do to push your career forward. And that's the manager's job, to tell you what to do to get you to that next level. And so if you're not prepared to do that, I don't think you should entertain the idea of a manager yet, and just keep it simple and keep it as a hobby. Another thing that I'm always quite wary of in terms of managers, you might disagree with me here, but some managers I know asked to be paid like a retainer.
Yeah.
I don't really agree with that. Again, it might work for some people, but the way I see it is when you're a manager, you're putting all of your faith and your passion into that band because you believe they're going to become something. And so that's why you take commission. And a lot of the times that you have to waive your commission because, you know, like the band can't go on tour if you're taking your 20% or 15% in my case.
Right.
But then you've got other artist managers who'll be like, yeah, like give me £200 a month. And then there's no real sort of incentive for them to be working their arse off because they know they're going to be getting no matter what they do or don't do.
That's a big no-no for me. I mean, Music Managers Forum, surely that's something that they would be advising people not to go with, or is that becoming more commonplace, the retainer?
I mean, it's surprisingly commonplace. I guess it depends on what sort of contract you want to sign, but I would always advise an artist to be a little bit wary because, you know, there's no right or wrong here. It's like, it might work to pay them that because perhaps in that contract they'll reduce their commission by that amount if they make it back, but then if they're not making that money back, they're still having to pay that retainer. So yeah, I don't know, it's always
that
something
sounds a bit double-edged sword to me.
Yeah.
But talking about commissions, you 20% or?
Yeah, I haven't got any contract with anyone actually. We haven't got a contract with that.
Contracts.
We haven't got a
actually,
contract with our Kaiser Chiefs manager. We had one years ago, but we haven't got one.
Right.
Because I think like you do it on the basis of like you're doing a good job, you get paid. That's it.
Okay.
So like I've got a sort of a thing which early on is a bit like because obviously you don't want to negotiate some amazing publishing deal and then them just run away when you get they sign it. But again, like I think if you are doing a good job and all that sort of thing, then and I always have a trial period as well. You know, do 6 months, work together, and at the end of it have a little meeting and see if it's working. So yeah, just like you, as I sort of said before, I think it's just such a trust relationship that you have to. I with my guys so far, and I haven't been bitten so far, I just trust that it's a relationship. So I get paid the 20% occasionally, not very often, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing as well. It's like you don't always take it like a lot. 20% of not a lot is not a lot. Do you know what I mean? So when an artist on the emerging level is like,
better off for them having it often, isn't it?
They need that money more than you do. Exactly that. So it's like that can go to further their career. So yeah, especially in the early parts of it, early years or whatever, it is that early period is so important for an artist to have those little bits of money. It's about how you use that, and then it grows, and then you come in at the right time, and then it build it later on. But but I very early on, the only artist I had a contract with was because they insisted on having it because they wanted that security. Other than that, I think it's always been very trust and you know that it will work in that way.
Yeah, because I have to be honest, I never had a contract with any of mine. It was all trust. But what about you, Megan? Do you?
Yeah, so I have a contract with my artists, but again, I do the whole. It's not like as soon as I make them, I present them a contract. We do the 6-month handshake deal because it is very much of how do we work together. Like, you know, we might just have different ideas of how things should work. And so you don't want to get a band into a contract and then they hate your guts and then they're stuck because they're like, oh God, I can't afford a lawyer to get out of this. So again, I think also coming from an artist perspective, I always like to be very fair in my approach. Sometimes even after the 6 months, we won't sign a contract because, you know, things are still very early days, and it's like, but as soon as, like, you know, record contracts are getting talked about, as soon as the big tours are coming about, that's when I usually present a contract, because again, even though technically I'm supposed to take the 15% across the board, I very, very rarely do.
Yeah.
And so if I'm putting in all of that time and all of that effort into that band to get them to that point, I would like to think that there would be no question and they'd be perfectly happy to sign that contract.
I say that as well. I think I haven't got anyone that's big enough really to sort of think about it really. So but I think if you get to that stage, then I think it is worth obviously having a contract for stuff like, I don't know, sunset clauses and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
I think another big part of it as well is like contract can be such a daunting thing as a document. It's like, as a label, I give it to an artist and say, like, go away, interrogate it, come back to me with questions. If you don't understand this, like, I don't want them to sign it unless they understand all of it. And not everyone is as, I don't know, as honest or as open as that. It's the same if you're an artist or you're a manager, it should be a very open and honest conversation about that, because that sets the tone for the rest of the relationship. So like the document should be, no matter the language in it, the words, whatever it is, it's like, what does it mean? Do you understand it? I understand it. This is the agreement. So yeah, I think that's really, really important.
And then if they don't understand it, do you say, join the MU and ask them?
Yeah, because you get like I think you get a free hour of legal advice on that? But yeah, like go and speak to people and make sure that you're getting advice on that as well. Yeah, it's really important.
Yeah, because they do actually do a great job, you know, of they'll vet it for you and highlight and stuff, and then you get that free hour to talk it through.
Yeah.
So yeah, and each individual band member, if they all become members of the MU, they each get an hour. So you could end up getting free legal advice. Yeah. Sorry, I'm looking over there because I know there's a band over there, and Tom, I bet. Yeah, ex-student. I bet he still hasn't joined the MU yet. It's going, yeah. All right. Okay. So let's start looking at artist development. Where is, if you've got someone who's they've done a few gigs, they've sort of released a couple of their own tracks, and you can feel that they've got potential. Where do you think the best place to start is on the development? Is that pushing to get more gigs, pushing to get more releases?
I think it's across. Well, it depends on the artist, because some people don't do gigs.
Yeah.
They're not interested. They're just bedroom people or whatever. But I think it's just across the board trying to sort of, like, I think it's hard. I think it's harder now to become successful. Like, I think when Kaisers were doing our thing, it felt like there was a bit of a ladder you could climb, and you had to do I don't know, get the NME piece and do a gig in London and do this thing and do that thing, get Lamac to play or whatever, and then if you did the right things, then you at least had a chance. Like, the labels would notice you, and you had a chance to, I don't know, sign to someone or not sign to someone, do it yourself or whatever. But whereas now I feel like it's like anything could make it happen. Like, you've got to do all the social media stuff. I think that can be a route in, kind of. But then loads of bands who just generate a fan base by touring, and people, I've forgotten the name, but people being like number one now, and then with just like kind of like really regional approach. Yeah. I've forgotten the name of that band, Latham's maybe.
And the Ratings as well. There's some of the things, wasn't there?
So it's just like loads of different approaches, and I think it depends on the artist, and I think you've got to do a bit of everything and see what works really. But my thing's always like I think, again, this probably doesn't work in all genres, but I'm just all about songs, which is like, hopefully good songs will always find the way. Right. So get the songwriting good, get all the A&R in, and get the production right, and then hopefully it all follows on from that.
Get publishing deal for them.
Maybe again, like sometimes, like with Kaiser's, we got published really early, and it really helped us because it's a really long and boring story. But the second part of our first album never came out. Our first, guys, boring. Our old band got a record deal, and then we stopped doing that. But then for some reason, they started to pay us the second half, and they tried to get out of it, but we actually got it from which the lawyer did actually a really great job. So we had about $8,000 or something. It wasn't loads of money, but that completely like bankrolled the beginning of Kaiser Chiefs. Like it was a total game changer.
Yeah.
So we could go on tour and do all sorts of stuff we wouldn't have been able to do. So that for me was really good. We had a publishing deal, but in general with artists, if you can get to a bigger level of success early and then go and get a publishing deal, then that's better because you can get more cash.
Yeah.
And better terms. So it's just dependent, isn't it, on. Don't rush it, basically. Don't rush any of it. Don't rush into signing to a manager. Don't rush to sign into a label. Don't rush to do anything. Just sort of do it as you need to do it, basically.
Yeah. For you, Megan, overseeing those that are releasing their own stuff, so effectively they're having their own little label. How much input do you have in supporting them with that?
Well, all of my artists currently are signed. Well, all but one of my artists are currently signed to a record label. They're independent labels, so there is still a little bit of hands-on in terms of communicating with the label, because obviously they don't have as much staff as a major. So I do have quite close relationships, quite good close relationships as well, which is always positive because there's nothing worse than not getting along with a record label, because it just becomes a stress and a half. But I am working with a developing artist at the moment, and I've actually just set up my own record label via Ingrooves. And that just came about because a friend of mine, she just started working there, and she knows that I've always had a passion for like new bands, and it's like I've always, you know, even before I was managing, like I was putting people in contact with other people. Like I'd go to so many shows and I'd just be like, this band's incredible, and it's like so when she started working at Ingroove, she approached me and just asked if I'd be interested in having a little imprint label, which I definitely was. It was like a dream come true. So yeah, I thought it's good to have that in place, because when I do have my developing artist, it makes it a lot easier to get them out in the public eye. Yeah. Because obviously there's then a team that's going to do the Spotify pitching, which is one less job for me. They're also really quite good when it comes to social media, and it's like they're quite hands-on. Like, you know, they give guidance, they do like social media health checks and stuff. So I'm working on that at the moment, and I'm very excited because I think the more exposure a young artist gets, then the better it is in terms of when they're getting an agent. Yeah. Because they'll obviously, unfortunately, look at Spotify numbers. That's how it operates now, and social media numbers. And so it's just this circle where it's like, how do you get those numbers if you can't play the shows? And how do you get the agent if you're not playing the shows? But how do you do? Yeah. So it's complicated, and again, it's very different with each artist.
I mean, how handy is it having having your own label if you are managing an artist that isn't releasing their stuff, or have, you know, but not doing it very well?
It's really it's very useful because you've got that infrastructure there and you can do things well. What I think it can take away is, ideally you'd have a label and the team or the individuals with people there, and then you'd have a manager, so that you've got this difference in the contacts that they will have. There'll be some crossover with your manager as well, but they will have different ones as well. So it's about building that wider team. But it's definitely useful. It's definitely helpful because it just allows you to do things well and have control over it and do it in that way. So I think, like Megan's saying, like having people at a distributor, then they become part of your team. It's almost like you're running it, but they're like part of the label, aren't they? They're the one doing it for you. So I think that's like, that can be invaluable. And I think coming back to the, like Megan starting this label, I think that's indicative of a good artist will be like, self-management is so important early on, because the more you need to do that obviously before you get a manager in there. But if you are good and you understand what's going on with where you want to push things and how you want to move forward, when you do get interest from a manager or something like that, it's like you don't just put your feet up. It's like, great, they'll do it all now. It's like you are still driving it and pushing it, and they're coming in and doing it together with you, and you just sort of growing the team from there. So I think it's your own desire and ability to grow your knowledge and understanding of it will lead the artist project further. If the artist project doesn't work out, then potentially you're a manager in the making from what you've experienced as an artist. So I think that was a big thing. Whenever I was playing and doing stuff, I was always the one pushing it forward and organising and doing things. So naturally, it's like, well, just take away the creative side in terms of making music and adapt it to artists that I love and I think are incredible.
Yeah, it's a lot about the organisation, isn't it? And also keeping artists focused, getting them turning up on time, sober.
Yeah. Luckily, I had an artist that was when they used to go out and play shows, they didn't really drink. But that was a nice little bargain until to get better fees. It's like, we don't need that bit on the rider, so like we'll get asked for a little bit more money. So think about that as well. Think about what you're going out for and what you want and what you can do with that.
Yeah.
Sobriety is an underrated thing on the live circuit. But yeah.
Have any of you had that issue though, a drunken artist turning up to a gig? And I mean, we've seen it with some of the old school turn up to TV interviews off their face, and but yeah. So.
It's not something I've ever experienced really. I think a lot, I don't know, maybe it's the artists I've worked with, but everyone's a bit more focused and a bit more on it, or are capable of playing with a few beers and willing to do that. I think sometimes it's more nerves have been a bit of an issue, where I've had an artist that were incredible and used to play in London because you had to go to London and put an agent in front of them and do all that, and they would go on tour and they'd be incredible every night, and then they'd get to London and then be aware that there was an agent in the room, and maybe I'd said it, so they knew and was all very open about it, and they would step on stage and look like they didn't know what they were holding and what the pedal, and they just sort of like, and it all fell apart. So that was a big learning curve for me of like, understand what that means to an artist in terms of pressure. It's like that, if they know an artist is in the room and that can really kick on their career, is it something they need to know about?
Yeah.
Or do they start overthinking and sort of crumble under the pressure of it? So yeah, it's about, again, understanding the individual as well.
Yeah. And maybe just saying, all right, we're doing a gig in London and leaving it at that.
Yeah, just a show, just another show, yeah, go and do it, yeah.
Okay. Right. What about being a manager, and when do you think feeling ready enough to be a manager? I mean, I was dropped in it basically, not in a bad way, in a good way. I came about it by, well, why don't you manage us, having gone to talk to a management company on behalf of a band, and they then turned around and says, well, why don't you do it, because you know all that stuff. So and that's how, because your knowledge base, knowing and understanding the industry is quite important, isn't it? Go on, Si.
Don't really know the question. I just was like doing the mentoring, and I heard a guy on introducing West Yorkshire, and I was like, this guy's a great songwriter. I wonder what he's up to. And so I spoke to him, and I was like, do you want to have a go at me managing you and see where we get to? And that was the start of it, really. And that was just sort of like instinctively thought it was good, and that maybe I could add some value to it, basically. And yeah, I feel like I just felt, I don't know really, like, I mean, I'm sort of 45, I don't have any kids, so I don't have loads of,
Right.
don't have a lot of responsibilities really, so and have some free time, although I don't anymore because now I manage bands, so it's sort of a mistake. But yeah, I just felt like it was like the next step, if you know what I mean, and like just good fun and like enjoy music, and I like going to gigs and like all of that stuff, and I loved when I was 20, most of it, maybe slightly different approach to it, maybe slightly less drunk, but I like all the same stuff still, so yeah, just doing it from a different angle was great. And like obviously we play sort of bigger places and stuff, so it's nice to be able to go to small shows and like, I don't know, just being involved. I think it's like being involved, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like just sort of, like I say, adding value is a really, really like, I don't know, corporate way of saying it, isn't it? But just like being involved and like helping people and helping people on their journey to hopefully being successful.
And what about financing? You know, financing, how do you, because, you know, you're running a business and it costs money one way or another, doesn't it? It costs,
Try and spend as little as possible by getting them get as much as possible is basically, I guess, the thing in it. But there's loads of funding, isn't there? There's absolutely tons of funding now. Like, again, like talking about Kaisers all the time here, but when we started, either we were just totally oblivious or there wasn't any mentoring, any like funds for like helping with recording or going on tour and stuff. And I think that more and more people recognise that if there isn't those sort of things, it's just a middle class thing that people who've got rich mums and dads can do basically. So more and more, there's loads of funds and they're really easy to apply for. Again, the Launchpad, you can get money for recording and live opportunities and stuff, and then obviously PRS and PPL and everyone do it as well, help musicians, and there's loads and loads. So look it up and like hopefully that's like I spend a bit of more time than I'd like doing funding bids.
right.
And yeah, just trying like working out what the priority, like on small artists, working out what the priority is. So like, do you need a radio plugger to get the radio things that you're going to get? And the answer is probably no. Do you need a PR? Do you want to spend some money on digital ads? What's the thing that this release is meant to do? What's the objectives? And what money do you need to spend to make it happen? And have you got that money? And if you haven't got it, you can't do it.
Yeah.
Or how can you get that money? And blah, blah, blah. Just, you know, again, it's all very bespoke, isn't it, basically?
Yeah. Because Launchpad, I mean, I've had Whiskers
Like a Launchpad advert, right?
I know it is, I know. Whiskers, he owes us commission.
Yeah, definitely.
But we've had him over twice to discuss Launchpad. Yeah, and that's a really handy thing to have in West Yorkshire. And Dan actually was talking about PRS and the foundation and the funds they've got. But again, yeah, with developing your career as a manager, Music Manager Forums Accelerator, that helped you, didn't it, to get into management?
Yeah, because when I first started managing artists, I was working a full-time job at university alongside that. And it wasn't a fun university job, it was like a really boring accounting at my desk 6-7 hours a day, like not being able to look away from the screen but trying to like send emails like below the desk and stuff. And then as a single parent, I would be going to my daughter, who was very young at the time, and trying to sort her out, but then be doing phone calls and going to London and coming back. So my work-life balance was really not in sync for the first couple of years.
Yeah.
So I heard about the MMF Accelerator Programme, which is something that managers at any stage in their career can apply for, and it's up to £15,000, I think.
Right.
And so I applied for that, and I was very, very fortunate to receive that funding because, you know, I think if I didn't, I'd have probably had to quit. The other benefit of that as well is they do a lot of workshops, and so it was really useful for me because there was a lot of things, especially like publishing, that I thought I knew about it, but then I didn't. It was very much a grey area. So they did a lot of workshops on publishing. They did a lot of workshops on touring, which I knew quite a bit about because the nature of my artist, that's sort of like their main thing. And it was also really good because I was living up in Liverpool. And even though I had a network of industry people, obviously the industry changed quite a lot from when I was living in London to move back up to Liverpool. So it's like I didn't have as many connections as I used to. So having taken part in the Accelerator Programme, there was like a community of, I think there was like 20 managers from across the country, and we'd all meet up before COVID hit, because I think that I was on that the year COVID came into play. So our first couple of meetings we had in person, and it was just so nice to like be in a room full of people who like were working with different types of artists. And then it's like, you know, we'd have links with other people, and it's like we'd have mutual friends, and then it opened quite a lot of doors, and it opened up collaborations. But then COVID came along and we had everything on Zoom. But yeah, it's like, but I also think there was a positive to that, which is, we were saying before how everything's always based in London.
Yeah.
But I think what that proved was it doesn't have to be in London. It's like things can be done remotely now. And yeah, I think with the way prices are increasing, I think people want to move their offices up north, and they realise some of the best bands come from the north. So
As it happens. Just quickly on marketing and PR, how much of it do you do yourselves?
Depends on the level of the artist, but early on, all of it. Like if you to save money when you're young, got that money to spend, I think this is the thing, like I was sort of alluding to earlier, it's like you sort of like that jack of all trades. Is like you've got to find a way to do the PR and learn that. So I was doing that. Even digital advertising sounds daunting as a thing, but like there are Google certificates that you can do on there and start learning about that yourself. And there's ways of like educating yourself and doing things like that. So I think a lot of it, starting out early on yourself, the more tools you can add to your armour in that way, I think the more you can offer and the better you can be as an artist manager. Yeah.
That's one of the biggest, I think, like buzzes for when you manage an artist is when they get a team member, like an agent, especially, so you're not having to get gigs anymore.
Yeah.
You're like, amazing feeling. I have to do that again for this guy. That's good. Great. Next, what's next?
What's next? Yeah. Oh, okay. I think we're about to hit that hour mark, so I will ask, are there any questions?
How do you guys manage your artists' expectations when they're first starting out?
Good question.
Anyone? Just being honest, I think, really. Like, again, it's like a trusting relationship. So being like realistic and having the conversations about, right, realistically, this is what's going to happen. Like with me and Scott, like with the artists we were doing together, when we had the meeting, they really wanted like to get a radio plugger, and we were like, but what are we going to achieve with that other than spending like, I don't know, £4,000 on it? And sort of negotiated with them down to the fact that actually we just do it ourselves, you know. So I think just being honest and sort of trying to be logical about the situation and everything. You know, hopefully things go better than you expect, but you know, not over promising. Basically, I think it's a really important thing to do.
Do you guys have a trick to kind of, so sometimes they want to jump and change their sort of route, so they're doing indie pop and they want to go metal or they want to go synth. Is there a way to get them to calm back down and to kind of fall back into what you saw in them as a manager and nurture that? Because they're obviously not seeing results straight away. And how do you not control, but how do you kind of guide them to be like, you're not going to see results overnight?
When I meet an artist and I'm thinking about working with them, I always ask them to write down wish lists. So it would be like a wish list of dream record labels. It would be a wish list of like attainable record labels, and we'll go through every aspect of a band, and we'll start from like, you know, absolute like highest possible dream come true, all the way down to what could we do right now. And I think that helps them think about where they want to be and what they want to do. And it also helps me as the manager understand what direction they want to take. Because by looking at that list, I'll start to be able to like form a team in my head from like people I know or like targets of people that I'd like to position them with. So that's kind of how I get them to keep. But then, you know, bands change, don't they? So, but for the beginning, I think it's helpful to do that.
I think authenticity is key as well. I think it's helping them to understand that whatever is the current trend or thing that's coming up at this moment in time, that artist was writing, recording, formulating that 6 months, 12 months ago. So if you start doing it now, by the time you've been in the studio, got it out, mixed, mastered, all nice and ready to go, it's like, all right, cool, it's a year later, and then that trend is gone, and you've done that to try, like, don't try and falsify something, be authentic to what you are as an artist, and trends will either catch up with you, or you make your own trend, or you forget about trends altogether, and you find the people, your crowd, and the people that will be into that music that are out there. It's just about identifying them and communicating them in an authentic way.
The relationship that you have with your artists, do they normally come about by you approaching them, or by them approaching you, or is it different each time?
Different each time, I think. So there are quite a few different artists. I was going to say with if people like jump around too much, I only had one artist like that, and eventually they jumped off me as well, so then that was fine. But yeah, different. So I approached one person, and then I think once I don't know if it's what it's like in Liverpool, but like in Leeds, where like our area, like there's not that many managers about.
Yeah.
So sort of if you go like, oh, I'm managing bands, then you sort of like suddenly
Everyone's
getting a
looking
lot
at you.
of approaches, and so like there's people like one I managed because like my friend sort of sent me them, and he kept sending them, and I was like, I don't know why he's sending me this band, I can't really work it out. So then I had a meeting with them, and then with all of them I didn't think you just go like, okay, well let's just try working together and see what happens.
I think I think most I've approached, I think, to go, but on the other side of that, like, same where I'm from is like shy bands getting out. Do you know what I mean? So if like you want it and you've identified somebody who's like, go and put yourself. Then it's much harder for them to be aware of you if you're just sitting back and waiting for it to happen. But just put yourself out there as well, and try it without any expectation of it really happening, and just keep on going that way.
When you decide to manage someone, is there like a set things like every month I have to do this, or like in your is that per an artist, like per contract, like as the manager I'm going to do this, etc., or is it just vary depending on the work and what stage they're at? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think for me it varies. It depends on where the artist is in their sort of like period of time of like pre-release, release, whatever it is. But it's more of like set expectations of like, it's difficult. It's not like you'd have like KPIs or anything. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, you must meet these demands or targets. I think what Megan's saying in terms of like, what are your goals and what are your sort of realistic goals and things like that are good. But as long as you're working towards those things, it's difficult because like you can't, an artist will say, well, that's a realistic level we want. These are our dream ones, these are our realistic ones. So if you don't get that, you get one of these. It's like, it doesn't work like that. It's out of their hands, it's out of your hands. But all you can do is the best intents and purposes to try and get them to the point where they want to be, but also where you have identified them as where you should be. So I wouldn't say there's like any sort of definite thing that you're doing, but as long as you are moving it forward, and I think communication is the biggest thing. As long as the artist feels like you are moving them forward and doing things for you, that tends to always be the best thing in my instance anyway. Yeah, I don't know if you feel any different.
Yeah, I always try and have like weekly Zooms with my artists. Even if they're completely out of cycle. Like I've got an artist right now who's writing an album, so there's nothing really that they're doing. Obviously I'm talking with their agent, their record label, in terms of what we're going to aim for, but we don't have the music to be pitching right now. So our catch-ups are literally just checking in, keeping that relationship like fresh, and they don't feel neglected. They know that I'm still thinking of them. I can tell them conversations I've had about them. I can tell them about gig offers. That's the other thing. It's like sometimes when you go to trust, it's like gig offers might come through and it's not even worth me taking to the band because I know that, you know, financially, whatever. So we'll talk about things like that. But yeah, I think communication is really important.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I'd say that not like monthly or anything. I think like if you do a project, like do an album or an EP, at the end of it you would go like, right, well, we're happy with how it went. What do we think is next? And that's an opportunity for either side to be like, okay, well, I don't think that I'm doing a good job, or it's working, or whatever, or it is working, and we can, you know, that would be for me. So like once a year or whatever, you'd be thinking about having a sort of, I don't know what the word is, breakdown of how it's going, but I think like week by week or month by month, anything could happen. Like I feel like with artists, you can be at a stage in a campaign where you're like, this isn't working, nothing's happening, I don't know what to do, I don't know how I'm going to make this like land or whatever, and then next day you get like a radio play and you land a tour and you do this and you do that, and like 2 days later you can be like, this is going amazingly.
Yeah.
I think it's also really good to work to a 12-month timeline.
Yeah.
18-month, 24-month, but 12-month minimum, just because then if it's like a shared Google document, everyone can see what they're supposed to be doing, what they're supposed to be delivering, and what they're supposed to be creating.
In terms of like artist development, kind of soft management, that side of it, what most artists that do it are kind of from a similar place. What sort of qualities do you look at would make you go, oh, I'm going to kind of pick this one for that management or development over another? Are they kind of milestones or like things that you see out of one, you kind of go, okay, I'll work with that. That's too early days or like that's too far.
The main thing for me is the passion for music and understanding that I can help communicate that to the right audience, whether that's industry or actual like audience, consumers, people that are engaged with it. So that was always the core of it with me. Now on a label side, which I suppose is slightly similar, but maybe a slightly different angle to it. We've got like a profile of artists that we look at. So the first thing is I've got to love the music, and that's got to be the basis of it. But the second part is like, are they out and touring and doing those sort of live things? Are they pushing things forward themselves? Is there a part there? And then we're on the stage of like, we're looking at the debut album sort of thing. So from a label perspective, I do have certain parameters that I've got, because there's not just me running the label, there's a couple of other people there. So it's like, we've all got to agree on that. I can't just be, I love this artist, because I need to justify it. But from a management thing, it was more of understanding that artist, then getting to know them, and then wanting to help them push it onto the right audience.
Yeah, I mean, same really. I think if I'm looking to develop an artist, it's like I know that there's not going to be any financial gain for quite some time. So I have to be 100% in love with it. Yeah. And I also have to see that the artists themselves are as willing to put in all of the blood, sweat and tears as I'm going to be doing. Because if I'm doing it and then they're slacking, it just becomes a bit like I'm a charity.
and if they do it, you reciprocate and do more, as you push yourself hard as well,
exactly.
don't you, when you can see them doing it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or that, why do they, like, I look at why they want a manager. Is it just to like book them a band for tours and not to do their PRS, you know, whatever? What do they need a manager? And why do they want one? And then like, yeah, the same, like I was thinking with Kaisers, when we your early Kaisers, we were like 5 just absolutely focused on being in a band and being successful. And like every job we got was to make sure that we could do gigs and do rehearsal and write songs. So, and like any opportunity came along,
Yeah.
and like we would be all over it immediately. So it's just like looking for that in artists, that sort of like how you've got to just really want it, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if they don't, you're not going to waste your time, are you?
Basically, yeah. You just, well, if they don't, you're just going to be chasing them to do TikTok.
Yeah.
For your life.
And they still went back.
Never do it.
All right.
Anyway.
Are you all actively looking for artists now? Or is it something that you don't really know? Or is it, is it sort of you come to the right artist and you're interested? Or is, are you always looking for artists, or do you get like enough of the last, enough of the bit?
I always want to know what's going on everywhere, because I'm dead nosy and I want to hear new music. But I'm not managing anymore because I want to focus on Clue primarily as the label side, as well as the other bits I'm doing. I think, but good opportunities that are, whether it's management or other things, I think Launchpad is a great place to be looking. There are funding, mentorship, live support things there. They signpost to other opportunities as well, so I think that's a great place to start. Come play with me, do some amazing stuff. So I do workshops there. There's art development there. If you're a first-time promoter or you want to be put on shows, there's submissions for releases. There's tons of stuff there. So I'm not personally looking for something, although I do want to know everything that's going on. But there are a couple of things I think to start looking at as well. Yeah.
I think it's in between, really. I think like I always feel like at the moment like I'm full, but then also if you see something like, oh, okay, this is interesting, and like looking at it, and then it comes down to stuff like, is there someone else I could co-manage it with or do something with, or if they've got a team in place, and obviously then that's kind of makes it a bit easier. So there's like other things to look for and just see, you know, like just see, because I think it's important to have enough time to, you know, give each artist, if everybody's suddenly busy, have you got enough time? So like I got kind of, it was fine kind of, but I got caught out with like COVID, obviously Kaisers weren't doing much and bands weren't really doing, you know, there's not that much touring, not much ever, and I was doing loads of stuff, and then everything kicked off again. I was like, I can't sleep. It's just too much texting to do. So yeah, I just think just making sure you got enough time to give everybody enough time.
Yeah, I always say never, but I do also try not to overload myself, just so I can, like you're saying, give each of your artists the amount of time that they deserve. But if someone does come along and I think that they're brilliant, it's like I'm always happy to, like, you know, consult, help, assist, or like introduce them to like colleagues from the MMF or something who might be looking for a band who'd be like a good fit for them. So, yeah.
Sorry.
No, so I was going to say the good fit thing is a really important thing as well. Like identify the people that you want to go for because of the genres and styles and artists that they work with already. Do you know what I mean? Like a manager is usually a manager within a genre or style because they love that and understand it and get it. So I think that's a big thing as well. Identify the right people.
Yeah. But Music Managers Forum, there are up and coming managers. They used to on the website have a place where you could submit. You can still do that because the website changed a bit and that seemed to disappear. But I think
it's still there.
I think it's
It's still
or it went but came back again. So I don't know.
Yeah, so you can submit yourself and managers can check you out, basically.
Yeah. Sell your soul to the devil. No, that's the record label. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. That has been really interesting, really useful. So thank you, Megan. Thank you, Si. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks for having us.
Can we give these people a big round of applause?
Thank you.